In this week's episode of NDVision. I feel like this should be a historical site that people can just go on your land.
Oh, no. No.
What's your address, by the way? No. Don't say
It's
it.
in Andover.
Oh.
You have to be deceased to be inducted. That's how they set this up,
Okay.
to be an inductee. So,
That's morbid.
yeah, I know, but that's the way.
They never thought that this was dangerous to drop dynamite down an oil well.
Well, even some of those other pieces of equipment, there's one in there, it would be moving, and as it was moving, you had to hook this onto this and take it off, and it's not uncommon for guys to be missing digits over the years doing that.
But I just can't fathom just dropping an open flame that's going to explode down into an oil.
So what they would put down in, they would put tubes of nitroglycerin first.
Hello and welcome to this episode of NDVision. I'm Nick Davis, and with me today I have Kelly Lounsberry. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
And you're the director of the Pioneer Oil Museum, president.
President of the board of directors of the Pioneer Oil Museum
Okay.
in Bolivar.
All right. Well, have you lived in Bolivar your whole life? Tell me about yourself.
I'm old. Lived in Bolivar my whole life. Went to school there, obviously. Taught 4 years in Belmont. Had a great short career there. Came back to Bolivar and taught for a total of 33 years, mostly fifth grade. Did some coaching, football, basketball, baseball. So teaching was a great career. Provided a lot for me. And my wife is from Cuba. She taught at Genesee Valley, and that's where we met, which was Belmont at the time.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's my background.
So you've been here, homegrown. Ever
Homegrown,
since.
yep.
Did you go to school in the area?
I started out at Elford State because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I either wanted to be a teacher or a dentist. I don't know why I went into teaching. I guess
Those are two very different
I know,
things.
but my dentist actually talked to me a few times about it, and I think I thought, God, do I want to just for the next 30 or 40 years be looking into people's mouths and having my fingers in there? I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But started at Elford State, 2 years for liberal arts, and I went on to Geneseo and got my teaching degree, and I went back to Geneseo part-time and got my master's.
Okay. And then were you commuting? Were you living in Geneseo?
Commuting in the summer.
Really?
A couple times, if I wasn't coaching for a night class, I might take a run up on like a Tuesday night and then come back. 60 miles to Geneseo was pretty easy, back and forth, other than the deer up on short track.
Yeah. So you commuted from Bolivar, Richburg, up to there?
Just for classes.
Just for classes?
Yeah, and that was only 1 day a week.
Oh, okay.
But in the summer, it was 5 days a week. But if I'm doing a
120 miles round trip, man.
Yeah, gas wasn't expensive then.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. What was your favorite part about teaching?
It's funny, the other day, we had a meeting of the alumni, the Bolivar-Richburg Central School Alumni Committee, and there's some young girls that I had in class that are in there, and one of them said, I remember when you did an activity, we had to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We had to follow directions, probably oral directions. Well, of course, they never followed them correctly, and the jelly was on top of the peanut butter, vice versa, or on the outside of the bread. And she said, I remember that. And her sister said, I remember a book that we read and the activities. There's a girl I ran into here several times in Wellsville that works here, a former student. She said, I had never had kiwi in my life, and you made us eat kiwi as part of a project, and I love kiwi now. And then not only the classroom, but kids that played, especially football for me over the years, just always run into former players and have great memories. And I guess that was part of it. There's a lot of good kids. Bob Dunsmore, who's a great football coach, I was able to play for him and coach with him. Pardon me. Toward the end of his career, one day, I think we had a kind of a poor year as far as the record went, and his comment to me was just he and I standing there talking. He says, sometimes we don't have good teams, but we always have good kids.
Right.
And that's always stuck with me. Mm-hmm. We had kids that maybe weren't athletic, but gave 110%, and they were just fun to be around.
Yeah.
Even in the lean years, sometimes it was a little tougher. But practices might be fun, and games, especially if you won, were fun. So a lot of memories from 33 years of coaching and teaching.
Yeah. What's one of your favorites? You mentioned the kiwi, and then you mentioned but what's what's one of your least favorites? How about that? You've been retired. You're allowed.
Teachers will talk about New York State testing, the modified or the standardized testing, the way they run it. Back when I think George Bush the first was president, they came up with No Child Left Behind.
Yep.
And they said, oh, every child has to go to college. And as teachers, we threw our hands up like, wait a minute. A lot of kids are not paperwork kids. They're not reading kids. They work and learn with their hands. Exactly. Yeah. And we just had a fit. Well, we couldn't do anything about it. And they implemented this program. And I remember...
Is this the Common Core?
No, it's not quite the same thing.
Okay.
They implemented it. Years later, they realized that it was a mistake. So they wanted to bring vocational training back into the schools. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the Buffalo City School District was renowned for their vocational program. Mm-hmm. And they had to cut a lot of it when No Child Left Behind came in. Pardon me. And so when that program ended, they wanted to bring the vocational back in, and there was no money for it.
Right.
So over the years, and the last few years, maybe since COVID especially, there's been a renewed emphasis on the trades, vocational. Mm-hmm. And in this area, and some examples from Bolivar, from the museum, other things I'm in, some of our contractors have retired.
Yeah.
A guy that used to take care of our car, do maintenance, has retired. Plumbers and electricians, they're in great demand.
Yeah. Oh, I know. They can charge as much as they want.
Yeah, and I said that to a guy one time, a contractor. I said, you always told me that you don't, he started talking about this years ago. He said, I don't work for nothing. I don't work for cheap. He said, I want to make a good living. And it's even increased since COVID.
Yep.
And, he's charging good money. Mm-hmm. And I don't begrudge him a cent because he can do stuff I can't do, and it's done right.
Right.
And so I really encourage kids to think about going into the trades.
Oh, yeah.
They could start out with a lot of money, with a lot less school debt. Mm-hmm. We have a guy in Bolivar, passed away, Joe Booker, third-generation oil man. And when he died, he left a lot of money for a scholarship at school in Bolivar. And so the family asked me as a retired teacher, and I took care of him, was friends with him, very close, would you be willing to come up with a scholarship for him? I said, yeah. And I said, first thing we ought to think about is make it vocational.
Yeah.
Third-generation oil man, out lugging pipe and drilling and stuff. And there's a lot of money in the account. We're going to be giving away some really big scholarships in his name this year.
I also need a scholarship. If you ever just want to throw one my way.
You have to be K through 12 at Bolivar Richburg.
I'll go back to school.
And then we had another oil family back in 2000. The woman never married, never had children. She donated a little over $1 million at that time. We now have about $3 million in the account. That's for more of an academic scholarship for kids going that direction. Last year, we gave a lot of kids, let's say 15 kids, $8,000 a year for 4 years.
Wow.
This year, we have our meeting in about 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised we'll be over $10,000 a year for 4 years.
Yeah.
And some of those kids that get it are kids that go to JCC, and there's a program at JCC where I think if you finished in the top 10 or 25% of your class, you pay no tuition if you're from Allegany or Cattaraugus County, something like that.
Okay.
So there are kids that we will send to JCC that aren't paying that and are still getting these big scholarships from us.
Right.
Hopefully they and their parents are taking care of the money, spending it wisely, maybe investing it those 2 years, then transferring on.
Yeah.
We've given away over $3 million from that scholarship. Now, not every child has used the money,
right.
But we've awarded that to them. And they have to have, I think, a 2.5 GPA and be a full-time student. But again, the academic scholarship is from the alumni, and then we have the Booker, and there are other ones for vocational and trades. I've had a lot of people come to graduation in Bolivar and say they can't believe how much money is given away every year.
Right.
I think last year at graduation with all the scholarships, they said over $3 million was awarded.
Woo!
Now, again, some kids don't take it. They go a different route.
Yep.
But what an opportunity for kids. So
yeah.
It's pretty nice.
I went to a trade school.
Did you?
Yeah, I would have flunked out of college. I would have just cared about partying and not cared about math and science and everything. But
well, I think my son's the same age as you. And he says, Dad, I got one of those scholarships when you guys graduated in 2008. Yeah. We just got the money for this academic scholarship in 2000, so we didn't have a lot of money built up. I think maybe he got $500 or something. He said, geez, I wish I was graduating now and get $8 or $10 grand a year.
Yeah.
He said, what a difference.
Jeez.
So.
Oh, I can't imagine it. Here's a question.
Yes.
How does someone like you get into the oil museum and history? What happened there? Have you always been doing it? Did you do it when you retired? When did you start caring about
history?
Not caring, I shouldn't say.
Right.
But when did you start getting involved with the Oil Museum?
History was always my favorite subject, always since a kid.
And so is that what you taught?
Yeah, we were departmentalized.
Okay.
So I would have 3 of the same classes a day in 5th grade. So I'd do 3 classes of social studies.
Okay. Yep.
And in college at Geneseo, I had a history degree with a concentration in teaching or whatever. So when I started teaching, when I came back to Bolivar, I was able to come right into 5th grade and do the social studies. And it wasn't the only thing, but I would do language arts and other things. But one person might do science, one person do math, one would do social studies.
Yep.
And I was able to focus on that. And in doing that, a lot of great projects that I found stole. I mean, that's teaching. You don't reinvent the wheel. You steal from other teachers and things. And living locally,
Yep.
one of the things that I did was I would do a unit on local history and bring in the oil stuff, things like that. And the kids were very interested because they could see these things. They could drive out in the woods and see old leases, old powerhouses. And the other thing I did was a unit on local Indians, and that piqued their interest because I did it at the beginning of the year. And parents would come in for Meet the Teacher, and I would have out display cases because I actually own property that has about a 500-year-old Indian village located on it.
Really?
And long before I bought the property, it was being excavated by a professor from Alfred, and I did a summer dig with him with a class, and he left, and I ended up buying it, and for 4 years did a summer school with kids, mostly junior high. Pardon me. And again, that was, and then I had a paper published from that, but that was something that kids, like the parents would come in, I lived here my whole life. I never knew about this.
Right.
If it's something that they can relate to, like the Indians or the oil industry, a little easier maybe than relating to the Civil War or Revolutionary War, things like that. And history's always been my favorite subject over the years.
Yeah.
And I was able to use it in my teaching career.
What branch of Native Americans was the town, the village that's on your property?
It's not Iroquois and it's not Seneca.
It's not Seneca?
No,
Okay.
Not at all.
Are they just like a small fraction, or?
Yeah, the cultural group is called McFate. Now that sounds like a Scottish name, not an Indian, but out in Meadville, Pennsylvania, the type site for this was found. And the type site means they found the same style of pottery with designs and things on it, the same arrow points. And it was, I believe, it was named for the man that owned the property, a Mr. McFate. I believe that's what it was. And these Indians, they spread throughout western Pennsylvania, into western New York a little bit, not much further north than the state line. But that's pretty amazing to be able to own a site like that and do some excavations and have a paper published. And again, take that stuff to school. And a lot of it was hands-on.
Yeah.
Everything was organized by the unit where we dug and the depth and things like that. But there was some stuff that I would call unprovenienced. It just came from different places, and the kids could touch those things.
Yeah.
And I said to them, when I'm excavating, I'm the first person in about 500 years to touch this stuff. We had it, I always wanted to do some carbon dating, radiocarbon dating, and save some money for that a few years ago. And boy, it's been a while since I thought about this, but the date, I think, was between 1575 and 1625 AD. So about 450, 500 years.
Yeah.
But as you're excavating, you're the first person to touch some of it. A lot of arrow points. Everybody wants arrowheads. I like arrowheads.
I was just going to ask you, what's the coolest thing that you found since you've been excavating?
When I first started, it was arrow points. Technically, they're called projectile points.
Now, were they like the big ones? Were they the small ones?
In fact, they're very, very small.
Okay.
A lot of people, years ago, they were called bird points because they thought that birds were the only things that they could kill with a point that small.
Right.
But as technology increased over thousands of years, they went from the larger ones.
And that was on spears, right? The larger ones?
The larger ones could be on spears, yes. That would be the paleo man with the mastodons and things. And then I don't think bows and arrows are that old, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But these are points for bows and arrows, and they shrank down over the years. And most of the ones we find are called Madison points, triangular points. So that was the the most interesting thing. Well, then all of a sudden, broken pieces of pottery.
Oh, yeah.
And they did not have people and things like that etched on them. It was mostly series of lines. They could be horizontal lines, diagonal lines, interspersed. They could have a ring of, call them punctates, small little circles. Supposedly the Indians also used their fingernails in the green clay to make designs. The native
Why is
peoples
the
were
clay
really...
green?
What's that?
Why is the clay green? Is it naturally green or
No, I think they call it green before it got fired to harden. And when they fired them, one of the things they used around here, there were a couple different things. Small pieces of grit in there, they would crush it up. And the other one was freshwater clamshell that they used.
Yeah.
I always talk about native peoples and the technology. There were no, for kids especially, you talk about tools. Oh, wrenches. And I said, no, nothing made out of metal. Not
Right.
a thing. Everything was natural. Every tool came from wood or from stone, basically.
Did you find any like hatchet heads or anything like that?
Not a full hatchet head or anything, but a couple small, like an adze that they would use to
Ads?
adze, A-D-Z-E.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can't even remember. I think there might have been a couple larger tools.
What is an ads? I'm sorry.
Just like a gouge.
Okay.
Now you got me thinking about that. It's been a long time since I thought about an adze. So I hope nobody goes and checks it and says, this guy's an idiot. But but the big thing with the tools is the arrow points that we find.
Yeah.
And then the pottery. And a really interesting thing is, I'll come back to this in a minute, but I found a lot of small kernels of corn.
Oh, really?
Now, around here, if you throw an ear of corn out, it's going to rot from the weather.
Yep.
So if it's in a fire pit, it's going to burn. If it's too far away, our wet climate is going to wreck it. But if it's close enough to the fire pit, somehow it goes through some...
Mummification?
I don't know. Transformation.
Yeah.
But it's called carbonized, I think. And you can pick these out. You can pick out the kernels.
Right.
You can also pick out beans and squash seeds. I'm going to quiz you. What are corn, beans, and squash called with the northeastern American Indians?
Oh, I have no idea. Oh, maize. Is it maize?
Maize is the corn, but the three of them are called the Three Sisters.
Okay.
Because they work together to fertilize the ground, to protect each other. So corn, beans, and squash. So we have found pieces of those, and I had them identified. I sent them to a woman in Ohio. She's a paleoethnobotanist, and she came back with which is pretty amazing. I mean, these are 500 years old, and she's identified them. So around one of the fire pits, I remember years ago, we only go down about 6 or 7 inches total. It's a very shallow site.
Okay.
It's on the top of a hill. The wind blows a lot of the leaves and stuff off, so there's not a lot of decay of leaves and things.
Right.
As we're excavating, we go down, and I don't even know where I was going with this. We find some of these things.
Have you found any of the fabric or animal skin from like teepees or anything that has been
They didn't have
mummified?
teepees.
Oh, they didn't have teepees.
Longhouses.
Okay.
Yeah, teepees were used. Actually, I think there were some some Algonquin tribes.
Okay.
Because you had the Iroquois and the Algonquin, and the Algonquins were more Canadian-based. I think, pardon me, some of them used kind of a teepee. I hate to even use that term. The teepee was more out on the plains with buffalo.
Yep.
But a roundhouse is what the Algonquins used.
Okay.
And the Iroquois used a longhouse.
Yep.
And that's what we have found. We found traces of 2 longhouses on our site.
Really?
And the first one we have, I believe it's 8 hearths, and they're about 36 inches wide. And they went up the middle of the longhouse, and they were used for heat, obviously.
Yep.
My feet?
Yeah.
I'm tapping them.
I think you're tapping the mic.
Am I? Sorry about that.
No worries.
They used them for heat. In our climate, you had to have that. And then for light, there were no lights in there.
Right.
And for cooking. So the hearths were multi-use.
Right.
So they'd have this one, 8 hearths up the middle, and then on either side of the longhouse, there were bunks. And families shared the cooking pit. So one family on one side would share this hearth with a family on the other side.
Wow.
And I think, if there were 8 hearths, you'd have 16 families. And we found and that one, we have a lot of that excavated.
Yep.
And the second one, I don't know what we have in that one, maybe 6 hearths so far. I've seen years ago, I read some formulas for calculating how many people lived in a village based on hearth. And I don't remember. I hate to even hazard a guess, maybe 150 people. It's a very small village.
Right.
But it's really interesting.
That is really cool. I feel like this should be a historical site that people can just go on your land.
Oh, no. No.
What's your address, by the way? No. Don't say
It's in Andover.
Oh. That is, what do you think happened to the tribe? Do you think they migrated? Do you just think they just never came back? What happened? Or did the...
Things could have happened, but...
is there evidence of like a battle or anything?
No. We think that probably they were only there for 2 or 3 years based on the artifacts. Now, I've had, and you'll have to remind me to come back to that one, but how I've come up with some of this information, I had a woman from the Rochester Museum and Science Center, and I'm talking 30 years ago or so, come down and visit and give me some help and guidance. And then there were a couple archaeologists that worked for the state that came down, and a couple archaeologists from Pennsylvania that came up. So I've tried to follow professional methods, and they've provided me with untold amounts of information and documents and stuff. So based on some of that, we think that maybe they were only there a while.
Right.
Our climate is such, and this is on the top of a hill, it could be tough. Although there is something called temperature inversion for the spring and fall, that as warm air rises, it keeps the heat a little bit higher on the top of a hill. And a lot of people around here wouldn't think about it.
Right.
And I always say, in the winter, if you're laying on the floor, you're lying on the floor in your house, it's pretty cold then.
Right.
In the summer, it's warm, but the warm air is rising. And that's outside for an archaeological site, that's contingent on temperature and elevation. So we figure that this site, others like it, probably had an extra 2 weeks in the spring and in the fall to extend the growing seasons.
Right.
Because our growing season around here is awfully short at times.
Very short.
And for us, if we get a frost, we can go to the store and we can pick up some food. And the local early people couldn't do that.
Right.
Of course, they hunted, and hunting was very important to them. And the deer population was very important. So maybe they left after a couple of years because of the weather. Maybe a lot of times these settlements are abandoned because the ground, and we think up on the top of the hill there was a cornfield. Okay. We've never done any work on it, but the soil gets depleted from nutrients, and they have to move on. And the other depletion is the animals.
Right.
The Seneca people up near Rochester, there's a sequence that's been published, I think 2 of them, the Seneca sequence from Rochester to here, to here, to here, to here, and they've got them chronologically dated and things, and they can show the movement of the people.
Really?
Yeah, it's an amazing history.
Do you know what the closest site like yours is to you?
Of the same people?
Yeah. Or are there? Or can you tell, like you just mentioned that they can kind of track where the Seneca went. Can you tell, like based on other sites that people have found, if this particular tribe is where they moved? No?
No. One of the reasons is there hasn't been the research done in the southern tier like there was in Rochester.
Right. I can't imagine. There's got to be...
Oh, I would think.
There's got to be hundreds, or at least dozens of these sites.
Yeah, and I mean, throughout western Pennsylvania, they found a lot more of the McFate sites. But there's been a lot more archaeological work done in those areas. And I've been taken out, a friend of mine who's an archaeologist down in Pennsylvania, took me to a bunch of sites that he's worked on, and some of them are McFate people.
Okay.
And then there's Monongahela people down there. I mean, there's just all sorts of cultural groups.
Right.
A lot of overlap and things.
Well, even if you think about it, and I've talked about, I love food. So I've talked about this, even regionally here nowadays, it's culturally different from here to Rochester or here to Buffalo. We have a Texas Hots and Beef on Wick down here, and people in Buffalo are like, what are you talking about? Not everyone, obviously. Rochester has garbage plates.
Yeah, exactly.
If you go over to Syracuse or something, they're like, what's a garbage plate? Yeah. We have, in Binghamton, there's Speedy's Chicken.
Oh, yeah.
We have Stern's Chicken here. It's so different, just miles.
And you get out of this area, and a lot of places don't have fish fries.
Right.
I mean, that's a huge thing for us locally.
Yeah. So. Big Irish settlement, I feel like. So going back to by the way, that's amazing. I also love history. So just knowing that I kind of want to just go explore now. Have you ever thought about doing LiDAR up on your site?
No.
No? It's probably not deep enough to make it worth it, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Really never given a thought, but when I watch shows with LiDAR on TV, it's incredible. Like the Mayan sites and stuff in Central America and
Yep.
Aztec. It's
Gobekli Tepe, like all this stuff.
it is amazing what they can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are much deeper depths, and you've got the rainforests and things. So maybe it wouldn't work around here. I don't know.
That's true. Because you did say that, it's only, 10 inches down.
Oh, not even that. 6 or 7 probably.
Really?
Depth.
Because of all the wind.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The leaves, instead of being allowed to sit there and rot and decompose, a lot of them are blown off. It's amazing, too. You get up there and it's mid-September and it's still got the canopy of leaves and it's dark. And you go up 2 days later and the leaves have all blown off and it's totally bright in there. It's like 2 different worlds. So, yeah.
They probably did live higher because, like you mentioned, the extra seasons there.
Yeah. And there's a stream at the base of the hill, which they would have needed for transportation, maybe.
Yeah. Any trout?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet.
No, there is trout in that stream. There
If
are.
you need
trout in
someone to test that, I can test it for you. Going to the oil museum. We talked about history and how you love history. How did you get into helping them or working with the Pioneer Oil Museum? Was it a thing or is it recent? When did it start, I guess?
It started in 1965 or 66.
Okay.
The New York State oil producers, a couple guys bought a store, or one of them owned a store on Main Street in Bolivar and turned it over to make it into a museum.
What was it before?
I was just going to say it was, I'd like to see the list that I have. It was a hardware store. It was an oil supply store. It was a Chinese laundry. It was all sorts of things over the years. It
A Chinese laundry?
Yes.
Like at dry cleaners?
No, I think it was, I don't know if it was, but you're talking back in the 30s, 40s. I don't know if they had dry cleaners then, but,
Yeah.
it was Chinese immigrants came. That was maybe one of the jobs that they could get.
Huh.
I mean, you have to go back to, I don't know how much you know about it, but Bolivar itself, the oil boom hit in Richburg technically in 1881, although they knew there was some oil around.
Right.
And the Bolivar-Richburg Valley, went from about, it's hard to say exactly, 1,200 people to 10 to 12,000 people in a year's time.
Right.
Bolivar and Richburg.
Allegheny County used to be one of the richest counties in the country, right?
Well, everything I've read said Bolivar and Wellsville were 2 of the richest. People have said in the country, in the state. So I like to kind of split it. Bolivar and Wellsville were 2 of the richest communities per capita in New York State, with more millionaires per capita in New York State.
More so than Manhattan and Long Island.
Well, per capita, so it's based on the number of people.
Okay.
So if, let's say, Manhattan has 1 million people, they would have a lot more millionaires, but based on the size of the community here.
You know what? I guess I never understood what per capita meant. Now I know.
Do some research, because my explanation of it doesn't make sense necessarily. But so, yeah, and then within a year's time, there was another oil strike down in Pennsylvania, and everybody left. During the oil boom, about 8,000 people lived in Richburg and 4,000 in Bolivar.
Again, this is the 1830s, you're saying?
1881 to
81 to
1882.
Okay.
8,000 in Richburg.
Wow.
4,000 in Bolivar. So, and a couple years
How many
later,
people are living there now?
yeah, I think the township of Bolivar, maybe just the village, is 1,200 or something,
Really?
I think. I'm going to Allentown a few years later, and I'm not sure. 1883. They kind of had a strike in Allentown too. I've got some information that says 1,600 people in Allentown and 65 businesses.
65 businesses?
Well, a lot of oil related.
Right. I'm trying to count how many businesses. There's a new disc golf course, post office. That's about it, right?
Yeah. Well, even related to the school and stuff, Bolivar football in the late 40s.
1,000.
Okay.
So 1,007 is the population in 2023 of Bolivar. And how many did you say?
I said 1,200. Wow. Oh, yeah, I guessed 1,200 today, but
yeah,
4,000 in Bolivar, 8,000 in Richburg.
Wow. And is Richburg larger than
Today?
Bolivar? Yeah.
No, not even close.
Right.
But I think when everybody left for this second strike down in Cherry Grove, Pennsylvania, when they came back, more people came to Bolivar. I'm not sure why, but I think the valley maybe was a little bit wider. Maybe geographically it made more sense to go back there and settle in Bolivar.
Right. And they're only like 5 miles from each other, right?
Really about 1 mile, 1.5 at the most.
Really?
Bolivar to Richmond, yeah. That's why the schools finally merged.
Right.
Because it didn't make any sense to have 2 separate districts that way.
It doesn't make much sense to have 2 separate districts anywhere right
I know.
nowadays. I don't know how Scio and Friendship are
I know.
holding on. You know?
I was going to say in the late 40s and 50s, Bolivar football, they had an oil bowl every year.
Okay.
And they'd bring a team in from out of the area. And I think it was 1951, I saw an article in the old Bolivar Breeze newspaper. All the oil producers, distributors would have their signs at the game, this and that. And it had a list of all the producers and distributors in Bolivar and Portville. And boy, it was over 100. I'm not sure if it was 200. It was a huge number of businesses, even as late as 1951.
Who was based off your research? Who was top tier? Like who was the biggest? Was it Sinclair? Was Sinclair in Bolivar? I know they were in Wellsville.
In Wellsville,
right?
So the crude oil from all the local places went to Sinclair.
Okay.
You had the refinery there. In Olean, you had Saucony Vacuum. I think it was Vacuum before that.
Is it kind of like how nowadays, I'm going to use this just as an example, how nowadays there's all the dairy farms, but all the dairy farms product goes to Saputo and Friendship locally,
something like that.
Or Cube, or whatever Empire Cheese or whatever just moved to Franklinville.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, and
so was it similar like that? All the small oil refiners went to
Yes.
Sinclair.
yeah,
Okay.
there were a lot of pipelines. There was the railroad that went through Bolivar, the Pittsburgh Shawmut Northern. When that went out of business in the late 40s, I believe maybe they put in more pipelines, but I know that they used trucks to pick up the crude at the different leases and take it to the refineries. Bolivar had a refinery. Actually, Bolivar had 2 or 3 small ones.
Okay.
The biggest one was Allegany Refiners, and that was from 1938 to 44 or something like that. I'm not sure. And all the local crude oil went in there, and that was built because there are two colors. And again, I'm not an oil guy.
Right.
But 2 types of crude. There's a green crude and a black crude, or a darker one. The black crude was a little bit more expensive to refine.
Okay.
So 1930.
Was it a higher quality or?
I don't know if it was higher quality or.
Okay.
32, 34 when they built it. It was more expensive, and they're still in the Depression at this time. The Depression started in 29. So some of the local refineries didn't want to take it anymore.
Right.
So the guys in Bolivar, again, the millionaires, so much money. Everything I've read said some of the bigger people, the bigger money, said, let's get together, boys, and build our own refinery in Bolivar.
Okay.
Which is amazing. Okay, let's get 20 guys and build a refinery or whatever.
Right.
So they built Allegany refiners so that they specifically could refine the black oil.
Where was the site of that?
Right
is
across
it
from
now?
my house.
Okay.
It's on Refinery Road.
Okay.
As you're heading out of town, before you get to the golf course, on the right, it's called Refinery Road. Today, that is Klein Cutlery out of Klein Tools. They make great scissors. A plug for go out and buy Klein tools and scissors. They're expensive, but they are tremendous. And I think they have about 47 people working there now.
Okay.
Second shift, so they're doing really well. But that was the old refinery.
Okay.
And I don't know. The refinery, like I said, went out in 46, or the railroad did. So the refinery shut down, didn't stop the production of oil, and they had to get pipelines put in and trucks and haul it to other refineries. One of the early refineries in Bolivar was started by L. Frank Baum. He wrote The Wizard of Oz. He and his father
Really?
lived in Richburg, I believe, during the oil boom, 1881.
The gentleman who wrote The Wizard of Oz
He and his
lived
father.
in Bolivar,
Yeah,
Richburg.
I think.
Wow.
And his father had, I believe he owned either the Richburg or Bolivar Opera House, because that was a source of entertainment at the time.
Sure.
And one of his jobs was to, this is the early days, when these wells, they would put dynamite or nitroglycerin down in and cause them to explode so that the oil would stimulate the flow. And in the early days, it flowed down the hills and into the creek, And good thing there was no DEC at that time, because it would have been nuts. But they skimmed the crude off and took it to a crude refinery, and that's what L. Frank Baum and his father, that was one of their jobs at the time.
Right. Is that why it always smells so oily in places like Allentown and everything? 'Cause
Yeah,
all the oil they just let run off.
Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
I
No,
mean,
sure.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. It's anybody that's producing any little bit, a couple drops on the ground, they clean it up. They have a much different sense of environmentalism today.
Right.
The guys out there, I think, are doing the best that they can to follow the rules. But yeah, I mean, when we were kids, we were just talking about it a couple days ago. Somebody said, "Yeah, I remember swimming in such and such a creek in Bolivar and seeing the rainbow effect
Yep.
on the water."
Yep.
You can see it today in a parking lot after a rainstorm where gasoline is leaked. Yeah, and you could smell crude, and that's the way it was at that time. So it was a different world.
Oh, yeah, it was. I'm glad that we have all those practices in place now. So the Pioneer Oil Museum started in the 60s.
Yep, that's where we're getting off track here a little bit.
No,
Started
I
in the
love
60s.
this, though.
And I don't think they did a lot other than collect things.
Okay.
Photographs, tools, documents. The way I understand it, everything kind of sat in there on Main Street. Maybe if somebody wanted to go in and look around, they would let them. But the Bolivar sesquicentennial, 150th birthday, was 1975.
Okay.
So a couple guys got together and they built some framework to exhibit things. So in 75, they opened it to the public. Now, maybe it was open before that, but that's the way I
They
understand
opened it at the same location.
Yep, same location on Main Street.
Okay.
And they used volunteers. They used, like people through a federal grant, senior citizens and things. So it ran there all these years. And then in 2000, a guy who kind of was in charge of it, Tom Manning, decided to retire and move to South Carolina. Pardon me. And he asked 7 of us to come in and form a board of directors.
Okay.
So there are 2 of us left. And I'm going to put a shout out to Rose Fienaughty. She's an older woman. She has been our treasurer since we started in 2000.
Wow.
And there's a lot of work involved in that. So
It's crazy that 2000 was 25 years.
I know.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, even more amazing is that I remember the sesquicentennial in 1975. Huge parade. I read accounts that maybe 8,000, 10,000 people were in town that day for the parade. But it was a different culture, a different society. People went to stuff like that more. And I was going to be a senior the next year, and we had our marching band, and we let off the parade, with 8,000 or 10,000 people on the streets.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to somebody a while ago, and your chest is just bursting out. Here you are. Everybody's going crazy. You're the hometown band. And that was the Sesqui. And I don't remember a lot about it because I was just a year too young to do anything. And now we're at the bicentennial this year.
Yeah.
And that was 50 years ago.
Right.
We had the Sesqui.
Was there a 175 at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
It just goes every 50 years?
Yeah, and I've never really heard of anybody doing 250 at local towns, small towns. Maybe they do, but it's usually sesquicentennial and bicentennial. So
Okay.
we've been working on it. So anyway, we started a board of directors in 2000, used volunteers for a long time, did a lot of work on the Main Street Museum, went in with another guy, Steve Yale, who's a Bolivar guy. Yep. He's now a retired teacher. And we were both on the board at the time. We painted the front rooms, and we covered 5 different colors of paint.
Really?
Yeah. By saying, this wall was yellow and this one was pink, and we standardized everything. But we were able to clean it up, get it organized and things. And things went pretty well for a few years, but we just ran out of space. That's one of the big things. It's a small, landlocked area. The building is very old. There's some issues with it. A gentleman who just passed away last November, December, Paul Plants, was our president. He was also the president of the New York State Oil Producers Association.
Okay.
So eventually, after just a few years, he convinced the oil producers to provide us with funding to eventually move the Main Street Museum 3 or 4 blocks away. It was an old Hahn-Schaffner pipe supply company, 6.5 acres. So
Is this back on the creek?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a few years of renovating buildings, demoing buildings, things like that. And it was a mess when we got that place. Everything was overgrown. It had a lot of pipe threading buildings. The windows were broken. The roofs were falling off. There were all sorts of pipe racks out in the fields. that needed work. So it was a big project. So we've gotten to that point now where we'd like to expand further.
Right.
I mean, the Main Street Museum has been fine, but like I said, small and landlocked.
Yep.
And at our second site already, we have a great big engine building, brand new. We built that before COVID, like 8 years ago.
Yep.
That's named the Joyce Exhibition Building, and that's in honor of Charlie Joyce, senior, older Charlie. Mm-hmm. The family donated money after he passed away. So that's got working oil field engines in it and some other collections. And it's like, okay, we're starting with that. Like I said, we demoed 2 or 3 buildings. Let's get to the point where we can move everything from Main Street down. And yeah, it's tough to give up Main Street visibility, but it was impossible the last few years to run Main Street, and also, if somebody wanted to see the other site, go down there. So we have to give up Main Street, but we have to that's one of the reasons I'm here.
And this is the Main Street.
More advertising, yes.
Main Street building right now.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, the goal is to do more advertising and get people to come around to the new site.
Yep.
Now, if you go to...
I do have the Facebook page pulled up.
Okay.
Would it be on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no, it wouldn't be. That was our website, I'm sorry.
No worries.
You can try exhibits and just see... Probably it's not that. Yeah, again, this is Main Street, just some of the engines and things, and just kind of running out of space for things. A variety of engines, things like that. It's a dynamite packing machine. A dynamite packing
They made their
machine.
own dynamite.
Yes, because the whole idea was to stimulate the flow of oil under the ground.
Right.
So they would drill the well, and as they're drilling, again, I hope any oil guy doesn't hear this because I'm not an oil man, but oil sands, they would hit oil sands and bring that up, and there'd be the smell of oil. So they knew what depth they had to get down to, depending on what the string of...
They never thought that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they never thought that this was dangerous to drop dynamite down an oil well.
Well, even some of those other pieces of equipment, there's one in there, it would be moving, and as it was moving, you had to hook this onto this and take it off, and it's not uncommon for guys to be missing digits over the years doing that.
But I just can't fathom dropping...
Well,
an open flame that's going to explode down into an oil.
So what they would put down they would put tubes of nitroglycerin first.
Okay.
Called shells or torpedoes. And there might be 6, 8, 10 of those tall ones, with, 40, 50 quarts of nitro. And then they would put dynamite down. And there were other ways of igniting it. But ignite it, cause an explosion. They also learned over the years to put other materials in the top to pack it down in,
right.
So the explosive force would go east and west, basically. And so in doing that, everything would come out, it would explode, but the oil, the natural gas would flow better. So that's called shooting a well.
Okay.
They definitely they had shooters. I'm not sure if there's pictures on here or not. I don't know.
It's all right. You can keep talking. I'll look through here.
Okay. These are men that went from location to location with horse-drawn trailers and later by trucks. And there's the dynamite packing machine.
Yep.
So there's so much dynamite they needed, they had to...
Is that you?
Yeah, less gray hair. Stomach's a little bit smaller, but I guess not a lot there. But that's a few years ago. They develop this equipment too, the guys in the oil fields, and the individual tools if they need them. When I was teaching, I'd say to the kids that were doing it, your tool breaks out here at this time, what do you do? Oh, you go online, you go to Home Depot. No, not in those days. You made a new one.
Yeah.
You started from scratch to build it to meet your needs.
Right.
So it's just an incredible industry.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if we have, probably not. We haven't done much on the website lately. But if you go to some of the other pages, galleries are just different photos. You can click on each one of those and go to...
Let's go to sites and...
Yeah, you can try that one. Or
Is that your phone? I think that's your phone.
that is my phone. I put it on vibrate.
You want
Can we tell the business that's calling me? Give them a little shout out there. So, General Roofing.
General Roofing.
Thanks for the help on the library. Just
there's all these sites. So these are all around the area?
Yeah, these are local scenes,
Now, does the oil museum, sorry, we're getting off topic, but does the oil museum cover the whole region, or does it just cover the Bolivar, like Allentown, Richburg area?
It's the only oil museum in New York State.
Okay, so is there stuff from the Sinclair refinery there?
Yeah, we might have a few things there, photographs especially, things like that. It's also, this industry crossed the border every day into Pennsylvania.
Right.
So we like to think that we represent Pennsylvania a little bit. There is a Penn-Brad Museum in Bradford. Great people to work with over there. We've worked with them on different things. But yeah, we cover basically New York State oil and gas industry.
Okay.
That's what we like to think of. So
you're the only one in the state.
The only one in New York
This is
State.
a massive state.
I know. So we'd like massive people to show up at the museum too.
What's the farthest that you can recall? What's the farthest someone has traveled specifically for the oil museum?
Well, we've had people in from other states, no doubt about it.
Really?
Yeah, I can remember somebody from Kansas. They were a local person, had been in the industry here in the 50s, and then got shipped out with their business.
Okay.
And wanted to come back home and see things. But yeah, from all over.
Really?
A couple years ago, there was a petroleum engineer. He was in town, to work with Otis Eastern.
Yep.
And his flight back home was leaving later in the day, and he came over to the museum in the morning, and boy, did I learn a lot from him. I should have audio taped him or videotaped him to get it. But yeah, you were talking about the businesses. Sinclair was a big business, and a lot of it was, that was a refinery, more national in some ways. But some of the families, I was just kind of checking. We have a wall of fame. We have 75. We will this year have 75 inductees, and just some of the Wellsell names: Walkley, Haskins, Richardson.
Okay.
And it got me thinking about, but some of the main names also, in addition, Messer was a huge name in the 40s and 50s.
Okay. And we're talking the 1900s, not the 1800s.
Yes, 1900s.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. I don't want to get it wrong. The Shainers, a big name. The Bradleys, they were into oil, gas, lumber. I lost it now. Somebody, was it? Well, I can't remember that.
Oh, no worries.
Somebody I wanted to mention and what they had done. But yeah, that not only did some of these people become very wealthy, they hired a lot of people too. They paid taxes, and then these people they hired, maybe their families opened stores. That happened during the oil boom itself in 1881.
Right.
These people came in to get rich quickly, but a lot of them didn't get rich from the oil. They opened a hardware store, or they were a lumberman or something. And
it's still the same way today. I work a lot in tourism, and when something comes, other buildings come. So like, let's say that, and I'm just going to use this as an example, but let's say a town starts really going and a Walmart comes, all of a sudden people see Walmart there, other chains, they start putting their stuff there because they know that the population's strong enough to hold it. So back in the day, the population must have been strong enough in Richburg and Bolivar and Allentown to hold all these stores. You said 65 stores or 85 in Allentown?
that's what I read.
That's insane.
Now, a lot of those could have been, obviously, were oil related.
Sure.
Oil supplies, things like
But they have to eat.
Exactly.
They have to drink. They have to go shopping for groceries.
Yep. And they drank pretty well, too, from what I understand.
I remember growing up, how many bars were there in Bolivar? One,
A lot.
two, three. Yeah.
A lot. A lot. I was speaking about my Indian site years ago. I have a relative who's involved in the Elford Station Historical Society.
Okay.
So I was there to speak, and somebody said, "Oh, you'd like to meet this man right here. You should be introduced to him." And went over and introduced myself and talked to him. And oh God, it just makes me mad when I can't remember a huge name. But he said something about he grew up in Bolivar, and he said my father had a restaurant in Bolivar. He said 1950. He said we had this restaurant. And he said what I remember is everybody had a huge car in Bolivar. There were Oldsmobiles and Buicks and Pontiacs or whatever the big ones were. Do you know why everybody drove a big car? well, I did because there was so much money. But I said, no, why? And he said, because these guys were making all this money in the oil fields.
Right.
And he said, my father would have people in all day for lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
He said, the problem was at night. They came in and they wanted to drink all night and there were problems. He said, and we didn't like that, so we moved to Alfred. And they had relatives in Alfred, and they started the, what am I trying to think of, the restaurant?
The Collegiate?
The Collegiate.
Now. It's just now called the Collegiate,
Yes,
right?
yeah. And they were involved, I can't think of the guy's name that had that.
There's Nino's. Nino's, yeah.
John Nino.
John Nino's, yep.
Yes. And the older one is the man that I met, and he was talking about it. And I said, my father graduated high school in 1950, and he used to talk about the same thing, all the fancy cars, all the money, things like that. But Mr. Nino said something about, my father had enough of it, the nighttime, the commotion, the fighting, and we left and went to Alfred.
Huh.
And the rest was history. So,
Wow.
And he had a good business there, too, the Collegiate.
Yeah. What restaurant did he have in Bolivar?
I don't know what it was called. Later on, when I remember, it was called the Washington. I don't know. It was more of a bar at that time. But just from 1950, talking about all the money that was there,
Right.
which was incredible.
Yeah. And now, you look at places like Allentown that are just,
Yep.
they are what they are now.
New York State has not been very supportive in a lot of ways.
Right.
Our society is different. I just read something the other day about the lack of major businesses, major stores being built or operating away from major cities. Years ago you had Dresser, whatever you want to call it, Siemens, Turbodyne. You had Olean, you had Wellsville. They employed 4,000 people in Wellsville or whatever it was. It wasn't uncommon for these big companies to be located far away from the big cities.
Right.
And the article I read said none of the new companies, when they expand, are any distance from cities.
Right.
And it's making it very difficult on the small towns.
Right.
So.
Well, after COVID, though, it's coming back because people are trying to get away from the cities.
Right. But as far as building plants and things, they're still not doing that. Yeah, during COVID, how many of them that you read about from New York City that moved up to the Adirondacks or whatever? And now, like you in technology, you can work from home.
Yeah.
It's a whole different society out there now. A lot of businesses, the employees work from
That's
home.
why cities boomed. Because of the bandwidth back in the internet boom, I guess we would call it, which wasn't that long ago when you think about it.
Even, throw a shout out here, my daughter-in-law in Rochester works from home.
Yeah.
And a lot of their friends work from home now.
Yeah.
So it's a different world.
I can't work from home. I started the business at home, and I just find myself like, I could fold the laundry here, do this. I didn't actually fold the laundry. My wife will call me out on that in a split second. But
I'm not sure.
I get distracted, so I needed a place to go.
Socially, how good that is to be
Yeah.
home all day. Even if, whether you're with a spouse or you're home by yourself, I would think you'd need that interaction too.
Yeah, definitely.
But the businesses are saving money. They're not paying downtown rent on the big buildings and things.
Yep.
You read how much real estate is available in major cities now, which is causing problems too.
Yeah.
So
Productivity did go up though when people working from home.
Yep, I read that.
What are the problems that you're facing right now with going back to the oil museum?
Well, I think we're getting fewer people come through Allegany County.
Right.
And that's one of the things with the museum. We were on Main Street, we had that visibility, but still not a lot of traffic going through, or not a lot of traffic that stopped. You get a lot of trucks and things like that, but I think that's slowed down too. So with our new museum, we've got to do some advertising. We've got to be more creative and try and draw people.
Do you think you'd be able to have like more hands-on exhibits? Because I know that, like with me, I love hands-on stuff. I love being able to like even just pull levers, push buttons, and anything like that.
That's one of our goals.
Right.
We put a new addition on our main building at our new site, 40 by 60 building. Just recently, we've been working on our first exhibit. This is not a hands-on thing.
Right.
I just took pictures of it yesterday. I could send those to you, and you could put them up there for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, actually, if you just pull them up on your phone, I can hold it because I'm shooting in a really high resolution, so I can push in easily.
So this is what we've tried to do. I don't know if you want it this way or...
Yeah, if you took it horizontally.
Okay.
All right. So what's this? These are two. It looks like just gas station.
Well, what we're trying to do is build, and it's not done yet.
Okay.
Behind it, you'll see a couple of there's sections to a wall.
Okay.
Behind that is an overhead door. We needed that to bring equipment in.
Right.
But we kind of wanted to cover it up. So that's one thing.
Okay.
So the wall, does that show if I do it or?
Yeah.
This wall slides out to the left.
Okay.
This wall swings this way. We open the overhead door up and we can bring in the main object that we wanted to bring in through that, which is this, and maybe I'll go back this way, 1930 Ford Model A truck
Oh yeah, you have this on your.
in working condition. So we wanted to be able to bring that inside, and we can protect it that way, and we're also covering up the overhead doors by putting this little display in. So it's not interactive. Yep, if you keep going, there's the video of it.
This car coming in. Oh, this someone was driving it.
Yes.
So it runs.
Oh, right there, a little honk for us. Dave Evans, one of our board members, got it running. Really, it didn't take him a lot of time. He had to have the starter rebuilt.
Yep.
We bought a new battery and cables, new fluids, and he got it up and running.
Yeah, there's not many parts in old vehicles that nowadays.
So we're going to have that in the Pioneer Oil Days parade.
Okay.
You can see the racks on this side, the passenger side. This went out in the oil leases out in the fields, and it carried pipe and other things.
Okay.
It's just like amazing that this still runs after all the time. Again, a 1930 Model A, so it's been around for a while.
Wow. That is a while. How old are those tires on it?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back here. So I don't know if that's showing, or can you?
What's that? Yeah.
Okay. So again, the left-hand door back there will move to the left, slide out. The right-hand door will swing the other way. The pumps are pumps that we had. They're nothing fancy. The globes aren't on there right now. We'll take those off.
Sure.
We built that little pedestal for them. And then we wanted to have some kind of replica windows in the gas station here. So you can see
Oh yeah.
the picture sits back a little bit, 10 inches to give it a little bit of depth.
Okay.
And then we have gas cans on the top. So you're asking about interactive stuff. That's the next step.
Right.
We want to do that. But right now, in our new addition, that's the only thing that we've put in that room, along with the dynamite packing wagon. We did get that in.
I'll just have you move in just a little bit.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
And that's all we've had the time to do. I was working with a museum exhibit company out of Buffalo. They came down a year ago last month. Went through all our buildings and gave us ideas. So I want to get back with them and see if they can build some interactive things for us. Now,
Right.
the cost is going to be a factor, a huge factor in that.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's not cost prohibitive, because especially for kids, they don't
Right.
want stagnant stuff on the wall.
Yep.
They want to be able to see and hear and things like that, and adults as well.
I am also kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a lot more interesting.
Right.
Now, I don't know what we'll be able to do. I don't know the price, the cost. I have no idea where we'll go with this plan.
How do you get your funding?
That was just asked of me the other day. Funding is always tough.
Right.
We send out a newsletter every year in February, and with it is a donation request letter. We get some money from that. We get a few small grants, not a lot. Big grants are very competitive.
Yep.
And you can always hire a grant writer, but you don't know what you're going to get. And are you just wasting the money on the grant writer?
Right.
So basically, it's small company, small oil company like mom and pop, or individuals that donate, and that's what we live on.
Right.
We have some money that we invested, and that helps us with some things too.
Is there a charge to like an entry fee for visitation? Or?
Yeah, I think it's $5 for adults and $2 for kids. As we start moving things from Main Street down to the new place, it'll be difficult to ask people to pay if you only have half the exhibits in there.
Sure.
So we'll play it by ear and see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, the funding
Is there any fundraisers that you put on? Is the wine and cheese, is that part of the oil museum, or is that something different?
That's part of the Oil Museum. The Women's Community Improvement Club, it used to be the Women's Lioness, Bolivar Lioness Club.
Right.
They do half of it, and we do half as a museum, and we each take half the profits. But I think each group's only making about $1,100 each or something in profits. It's a lot of work for not a lot of money.
Right.
But the biggest thing with that is the exposure.
Right.
Because that night we have the New York State Oil Producers Wall of Fame induction, and then it rolls into the wine and cheese tasting. And the last couple of years, we've had about 200 people there.
Yeah.
Somebody last year, the year before, said, right at the end of the Wall of Fame induction, you still got 100 people outside that want to come in. And we laughed. There are 100 people inside for the Wall of Fame induction, and they're older people interested in oil. The next 100 coming in are the kids that are there for the wine and cheese. So, but it brings them in, which is kind of neat for me because I see a lot of former students in there.
Right.
But you get different groups in for different things. We have, that's on Friday night. I think it's the 27th of June this year. We'll have a couple oil field engines working in our engine building. We have a guy doing some replica blacksmith work.
Oh, right, Pioneer Oil Days.
Yeah.
Right. Do you do any fundraising there aside from the wine and cheese?
No, there's really not an opportunity for fundraising.
I feel like you should just walk around the crowd during the parade with hats. And
I used to have kids do that. I'd have my fifth graders do that. And, we made a little bit, but not a lot. Since I'm not teaching, there's not that.
Or even better, you need a QR code, so that way people can scan and use Venmo or PayPal or something.
We don't have Venmo or PayPal, but, we've talked about it.
Yeah. Just send it to your personal one, and then you can just take the money out.
Trust me, we'll get 100% of it. But, it's, we're doing okay right now. We're very creative with our money, just like that replica gas station.
Yep.
We've got a few $100s in, I don't know, some paint, lumber, things like that. But the windows were old windows that were donated to us. The pumps we had. So we try to be very creative.
Yeah. And then you just, was it last year or 2 years ago, the spot in Petrolia that you...
Oh, yeah, that was COVID year. That was 2020, I believe, because I remember...
Was it that long ago?
A picture of us when we had a grand reopening, and a bunch of the board members had masks on.
Right.
But yeah, that property in Petrolia, which was
That's where I grew up, by the way.
Oh, did you really?
I grew right on Yeager Hill.
Oh, okay. That's oil country out that way, definitely. I think it was 1879, Triangle Number 1 was drilled.
Yep.
So come to find out, in the mid-'60s, when the museum was started, that property had been deeded over to us where Triangle Number 1 was. Oh. But Triangle Number 1 is down in the field a little bit. So we were deeded that, like a quarter-acre parcel, and then I think a right-of-way to get down there. So after a long time, here a few years ago, we worked with the landowner, lawyer, we got a full half acre or acre of land donated to us. Wow. So we don't have just this little access.
Yeah.
And we were able to redo. There was a concrete monument that New York State Oil Producers put in there in 1935 or something. It was in terrible shape, so we redid that. We put that pavilion over it, the historic marker out there from the state with the state colors. We had that redone. So, yeah, there are some other...
Did someone steal the brass?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and actually we could see the tire marks where they had come in. Probably they tried to pull it. They couldn't get it. They came in, probably hooked a chain around it, and pulled it out, and you could see where they'd been spinning out.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, they never did find that person, but at about the same time as when they went into the Wellsville Cemetery and stole some of the bricks, they did arrest somebody for that.
Right.
So I'm guessing that our guy that did our job was the same person.
Same person, probably.
So we had it redone, but we had it, I think, in granite instead of brass or whatever. And it's beautiful, too.
Yeah.
But, we put we had... some different people donate materials for that pavilion. I can't even think of some of the names again, and I'd like to shout it out to them, but I can't remember. We did most of the work ourselves on that. We put some exterior outdoor frames inside there with some photos and some information. Had a donation of some AstroTurf. We laid that down around it. There are some other historic markers for the oil industry in Allegany and Cattaraugus counties, and who knows? Maybe we'll do something with those someday. But
maybe we could have a scavenger hunt. I'm serious. Like,
I know.
where they do geocaching, just
Yeah.
like set a different thing and they can bring it back to the museum and get a discount.
We had a geocache at Main Street outside. There's a oil field jack out there, and we had a geocache out there.
Really?
We talked about, what are they, dice runs for
Yep.
motorcycles or snowmobiles. I mean, we've talked about a lot of different things. A couple years ago, we had a guy talk about setting up a festival, a wax festival. People are like, wax? Wax is made from oil.
Oh, right.
And he spent probably a year researching it, different things we can do and stuff, and nothing came of that. But we saved all of his research. Mm-hmm. We've talked about swap meets, farmers markets and things. That just came up again a couple months ago. But again, now we started with 7 board members, and a couple of years ago we added a few more. I think we're at 14. We need 15. But some of the board members are older, and and some of them are younger and have kids.
Yep.
It's tough to get manpower for anything like this. So yeah, it sounds wonderful to do some of those things, but the logistics, you have to be careful
Sure.
when you set up. But we're thinking of different stuff.
What's your outlook for the new space? When do you think you're going to have that, for the most part, completed where people can start visiting?
Again, I mean, we've been working for 3 weeks or a month on this gas station because the guy that I'm working with, I'm the laborer.
Yeah.
He is 76 years old
Right.
this year. But retired teacher, contractor, Dave Evans, he did a program at school where they renovated/restored about 6 old homes in the community of Bolivar. And it was kids that might have fallen through the cracks and stuff. It was great. So he's doing this, but again, we're older, so how many more projects can we get done this summer?
Right.
We don't want to just haul stuff in and throw it in there. The existing room where the access is, we also want to incorporate that into the new quote-unquote museum space. It's going to take time.
Okay.
Because we want to plan. Now, my son went to college with a girl at NAS in Rochester who ended up, just in the last few months, moving down here.
Yep.
She made a connection with the museum. She's got art history or art background. She's done some museum exhibits and things. So she's working with us too.
Nice.
So I'm not sure how long it'll take. It's not going to be a 6-month.
Okay.
I'm not even sure by next spring at this time how much we'll have in there.
Right.
I'd like to have some things in there, but I want it done right. Mm-hmm. This guy from Buffalo, the museum exhibit company that came down, went through like I said, Main Street building, and we have 3 or 4 other buildings at our new site for people to see. And after he left each one, he said, "You have a lot of stuff in this building. You have a lot of stuff." Finally, I said, "Just come out and say it. We have a lot of junk in these buildings."
Right.
But we want it set up the right way, too.
Sure.
We don't want it to just cram together. So a lot of our artifacts and stuff will have to go into storage, which we have at our new site.
Nice.
So,
What can people do to help or donate? If they want to be on the board, who do they reach out to?
well, we just have a 15-member board. We don't have friends of the museum or anything,
Okay.
but they can donate.
I would have friends in the museum if they want to, right?
Well-
So the more hands, the better.
Yeah, what I do is people ask me about friends, and I say we have this fundraiser. Their names go into our newsletter. I put them on the wall of the museum each year. So that's kind of our friends of the museum. They support us financially, but it's amazing how many of them say, "Hey, I've got this," or "I can do that." You can send a donation right to the museum, Pioneer Oil Museum. Post Office Box 332 in Bolivar, 14715. I know you had our Facebook page up. I try and take care of that, but I am old. I am not a Facebook person. Somebody younger could do a better job. Now that we're getting going here, over the next few weeks, I just laid out a calendar yesterday. I'll be putting stuff on for the different inductees for the Wall of Fame.
Keep sliding
Sorry
out.
about that.
No worries.
For the Wall of Fame, I'll be putting the inductees on, their bios, photographs, and things.
Yep.
I'm going to read the names of the inductees this year for the
Sure,
Wall
go
of
ahead.
Fame. So just a little publicity, but for them also. This Wallace Sawyer, I'm not sure if he grew up in Wellsville, but he had a lot of connections in Wellsville. Oil man, the family was in oil. He bought a bunch of different leases and things. We're talking 1915, the 20s, the 30s. Eventually in Bolivar, bought a gas station, called it the Sawyer Garage. Just a couple days ago, I knew that he had bought this property, the Finnissy and Kinley oil lease, and I found an article in the old newspaper from 1930.
Really?
And it said Wallace Sawyer bought this from so-and-so. I think it said 300 acres and 80 oil wells.
Wow.
Now, this is 1930. It says the cost was an estimated $500,000. So I put an inflation calculator on that.
Yeah.
It's almost $9 million
Yeah.
today. So Wallace Sawyer is one of our inductees. Bob Wilkinson is a local Bolivar guy. He pumped some wells. He was a producer his whole life. Was involved in other activities as well. Bill McEnroe, William McEnroe, this is a Wellsville name. His family, his descendants came in, might have been COVID year. If it wasn't 2020, it was 21. And they wanted to donate a bench to us. And they gave me this paper, and it said, Bill McEnroe, number one, produced the most lucrative 5-acre parcel of oil production in all of New York State.
Wow.
Like, okay. And then it said, was instrumental in an early oil production. We talked about shooting wells, dropping things down in. Over the years, that kind of changed. They went to a water flooding operation where they would use a 5-spot program. 4 spots, 4 corners of a rectangle or triangle were high-pressure water injections, and then in the middle was the oil recovery.
Okay.
But this was 5-spot, 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 hundreds of them, and oil was flowing. And that was started in 1920. So by the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, again, that's when Bolivar and Wellsville became very wealthy.
Right.
So the water flooding was a huge time. And this Bill McEnroe, his family decided to use water stimulation or something to help. And the family said, all this is in the definitive book, The History of New York Oil. It's called Empire Oil. And I thought, okay.
You have that right there?
I have it there.
Here, let me see. I'll just hold it up for everybody.
Okay, that's the old one. Yeah. And I just ordered more reprints of it the other day. We're going to have some of those come in. I don't want to get off the track too much.
No worries.
That was written around 1950. And here's another one around 1948-50, both of them, both written by John Herrick. John Herrick was a newspaper publisher, philanthropist, oil producer. And then we have, I'll come back here in just a minute, but George Bradley of the Bradley family. George is writing a follow-up to the history of Bolivar for the bicentennial.
Okay.
He's going to have it done by late June. He's going to have about 400 pages. He has sent me some PDF files. Very readable, very interesting. A lot of biographies of people you wouldn't expect,
right.
Like a local barber and thing who was kind of a celebrity. It's going to be a great book for people that are interested in that. So anyway, this Bill McEnroe was mentioned in Empire Oil, so I thought, well, this is legit with the family. So those are the first 3. The next man is Jim McFarland, Pennsylvania guy. Again, the oil industry crossed the border.
Right.
Every day they were back and forth. But Jim and his father, they were involved in producing a lot of, he did a lot with lands that were highly regulated.
Right.
Public and private lands, developed them, worked on horizontal drilling in there. And he was in countless organizations, so a big man. And then our last one was Paul Plants.
Okay.
And Paul was our president of our board for the museum back in 2000. And he was president. He was on the board for, I think, 24 years and president for 15 or 17. Just unbelievable person. Tremendous man, tremendous human being. But he passed away last fall, and we decided instead of doing 4 nominees, it was right when we were selecting. Paul and I had just had a meeting to choose our 4 nominees. And a few weeks later, 3-4 weeks later, a month later, he passed away. So I thought, it's a perfect time to put him in and honor him.
Sure.
So we're going to have 5 this year. So hopefully we'll have a big crowd. Like I said, the last couple of years, it's been plus or minus 200
And
people.
what's the date on this?
This is the 27th, I think it is, Friday the 27th of June.
Friday the 27th of June, and that's the
because-
same time as the wine and cheese.
Yeah, it rolls right into it.
Okay.
Let me just check, yep. The induction ceremony is at 6 o'clock that night. It'll probably take a little bit longer with Paul and some of the other things this year. About 6:40, it rolls into the wine and cheese. We use Finger Lakes wines.
Yep.
And then we changed the way that we put the food out after COVID. So it's individual cups, kind of charcuterie cups.
Yep.
Cuba Cheese Shop is a huge supporter of us. We get a lot of cheese from them.
Yeah, the Bradleys. You said that name, right?
Yep. They're related,
Yeah.
the Bradleys. And then our board members of the museum will fill in cups, and the Women's Community Improvement Club will bring them. And so there's a huge selection of things to eat in there also.
Nice.
So, yeah, that'll be a big night for us. We'll have
June
a lot going on.
27th,
Yes.
6 p.m.
Yep.
Okay. How do people buy tickets?
We used to do a lot, pre-sale, which we do. The Main Street Museum, you can get them. The library, when it's open in Bolivar, you can pick some up there. You can also just send a letter. But anymore, we've kind of gone to just more sales the day of the night of the event right at the door.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's always plenty of tickets there.
Nice. So even if you don't pre-buy, you can just show up and
Right.
you'll still get some wine and
Yep.
some snacky poos.
Yeah, and then you can bring another check as a donation to the museum.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people do that. And
I'm telling you, you need to have a QR code.
I know,
You need
I
to get
know.
on PayPal or Venmo or something.
we weren't sure. Paul Plants is the one who organized this Wall of Fame through
Yep.
the oil producers. And he said to me, I just don't know if it's going to go. And over the years, it has grown. And a family member, and you have to be deceased to be inducted. That's how they set this up,
Okay.
to be an inductee. So,
It's morbid.
yeah, I know, but that's the way. So a family member will come up, they'll accept the plaque, they'll talk, and quite often we will have people in tears. It's become very emotional, very important to families, oil families. And like I said, at first we weren't sure if it would matter. But here you talk about people coming back. For this, I know last year, the year before, we had a guy come in from New Hampshire. His father was being inducted. A few years ago, we had somebody from Florida. Florida, Riley Allen was a big name around here. Allentown was named for him.
Yep.
So you're talking late 1800s. We finally got him inducted. We finally found family members.
Good.
And a guy came in from Florida for that. So, yeah, they'll come in from a lot of places for this. So. And the weather is key, please. Last year, the Friday night was wonderful, and Saturday it just monsooned on parade day. Just awful.
I remember that, actually.
I know. So I'm looking for a drought that week.
Right.
That would be the best thing. But it is the bicentennial also.
Okay.
I'm in the process for the bicentennial standpoint of trying to come up with a database of as many oil and gas companies as I can, like in 2 or 3 counties of New York and a couple of Pennsylvania, and inviting them to participate in the parade and put their equipment in. And at our museum meeting last night, the board agreed to provide 2 awards for oil field equipment. We're going to do 2 different ones at $200 a piece. I don't know what we're going to call them, best of show.
Right.
Sounds like a dog show or something, but we'll come up with a couple of them. And we'd really like to get a lot more oil and gas equipment in the parade.
Good.
So,
So this is the weekend of June 27th, right?
it
Last
actually,
weekend in June.
yep. Pioneer Oil Days starts on Sunday before that.
Okay.
I think it's the 22nd. But we're running the bicentennial in conjunction with
the
Pioneer
parade.
Oil Days because they have the parade in there. So on the first Sunday, they always have an antique tractor pull.
Yep.
This year also, later in the day, we're going to have bathtub races on Main Street in Bolivar because that's what they did in the sesquicentennial back in 1975.
Okay.
We're going to do an introductory thing that night. And then each night during the week, there are different events. And like I said, the bicentennial has supplemented. We're doing a few more activities. In particular, on Tuesday night, Craig Brack, who former county historian, doesn't really speak anymore, but I called him, and he and I go way back. He used to come to school for me for the kids, and he's going to do a little spiel for us. Wednesday night, Noreen Ferris, who's a legend around here in music and concerts, they'll have a big concert. A lot of former students. I'm not sure. There's a group she has called Mosaic. I'm not sure if they're in it, but that'll be at the Bolivar High School.
Nice.
Thursday, and I'm missing some of the things, obviously. Thursday in the parking lot next to the library, because I'm president of the library, so I'm thinking about this one, is a movie Under the Stars or something. The great big blow-up screen we put out there.
Yep.
And there's a strawberry festival in Richburg. The fire department does different things. Oh, Tuesday night is Family Fun Night.
Okay.
The Baldwin family puts that on. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. And
Right.
like I said, we're trying to get more in the parade, trying to get a few more musical groups in there. But as you mentioned, COVID, once COVID came, that really changed things too.
Yep.
As far as community events, people just don't get involved as much.
Yep.
So, but
Well, you got an event. We could have probably talked for hours on the history. I loved hearing about the Native American tribe that's in your backyard. If you want to check it out, his address is... No, he's not going to.
Andover, New York, care of Nick Davis.
But I really appreciate you coming on, and I wish nothing but the best for the Pioneer Oil Museum. If you're interested, please help out, donate, volunteer your time, and make sure that this year you check out the weekend of June 27th, starting the 22nd.
22nd.
Is when a lot of the stuff for the Pioneer Oil
28th
Museum
is a parade. We really didn't talk a lot. There's also, tons of activities that day.
So just go check it out. There's something for everybody.
I'm trying to think, what are we? We're doing a beard and mustache contest like the old days. And then on Saturday also, the Alumni Association, and we always do a social at the country club.
Yep.
And that'll get, 150 people or something. I'm not sure what that is. Brings a lot of people back. There's a very strong alumni association.
In Bolivar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Surprisingly. But
Well, Kelly, I appreciate you coming on.
thank you for having me.
All right.
Yep.